welcome in. Welcome back. It is another brand new edition of the 901 Soccer Podcast, and I'm your host, Lawrence Dockery. You can find me on Twitter at LDoc93. You can find the 901 Soccer Podcast on Twitter at 901 Soccer Pod. You can find Bluff City Media on Twitter at BluffCity_media. Also find us on Facebook. Just search 901 Soccer and just search Bluff City Media. And, of course, we should just pop right up both times. And if we don't, it's probably user error. And, of course, if you're watching this, that means you're watching it on YouTube. So please make sure to like the video. If you have questions or thoughts or concerns, please comment on the video. And, of course, make sure that you are subscribed to the Bluff City Media YouTube channel. Got a lot of good stuff going on here at Bluff City Media. If you're a college football fan, we've got a college football show on Saturdays now. So I highly recommend that everybody tune into that. Yours truly might be making an appearance on there at some point, so stay tuned for that. But this is, as much as I love college football, this is not a college football show here. This is the 901 Soccer Podcast. So what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about things that are 901 Soccer related, primarily the men's and women's teams at the University of Memphis. It's been a minute since we've been able to do one of these. Unfortunately, had some technical difficulties last week where my laptop was no longer speaking to my home Wi-Fi network, and that took all sorts of doing and figuring it out, and I probably made it a whole lot harder than it really was. But here we are, where we got where we needed to go. It's sometimes it's about the destination and not really so much the journey. So here we are. We're back, and hopefully better than ever. And we're going to talk Memphis Tigers men's and women's soccer. Probably going to spend more time talking about the women than about the men. Unfortunately, that just historically has been the way that it's been. Not unfortunate, but I would like to be able to spend an equal time talking about each team because they were each equally good. Unfortunately, that's not the case this year. The men's team is fighting for their conference tournament lives right now. And the women's team is flying very, very, very high. I mean, they are in two very different places. And it's unfortunate that they both can't be flying very high, because it looked like for about 3 years, coming into this year, it looked like for about the last 3 years that they were both going to be able to maintain consistent, stable success. And I think once the seasons are over, we can kind of go into more of that. But for right now, we're just going to kind of go like week by week, game by game, and tell you what's going on. So we'll get started with the men's team at the University of Memphis. And I hate to say it, there's just no other way to put it. They're just not very good this year. And that's a major bummer, because you look at the last 3 years. I mean, I don't know how many times I've said this, but I mean, it bears repeating that the last 3 years for this program have probably been the three best in the history of the program. You had an NCAA tournament appearance in 2022. You hosted and won an NCAA tournament game in 2023. Over 1,000 people showed up to watch that game. And, of course, as soon as I sit down to do this is when the freezer decides to make ice. And then last year, they didn't go to the NCAA tournament. They got off to a terrible start. They regrouped and won the AAC regular season title and hosted the semifinals and conference championship game. That's 3 pretty good years for a program that historically hasn't had much in the way of postseason success. I think they had an NCAA tournament appearance. They won the CUSA tournament in 2004 and went to the NCAA tournament in like 93. So in my lifetime, I'm 31 years old. I'm going to be 32 in 2 months. In my lifetime, they've had 4 NCAA tournament appearances, and 2 of them have been in the last 3 years. We'll talk more about that after the season. So you come into the season on the back of 3 very good years, and Coach Maruti came on our show and said, it's reload, it's not rebuild. And they, looked all right in the preseason. They had an okay result, an okay-ish result, and a very good result. And I'm trying to think if they had any more preseason. I think they just had the 3. But the regular season started and you got a draw on the road at Lipscomb. And you can go back to one of the shows we did earlier this year where I said, hey, it's not time to panic yet. The formula is there. The formula for this team to make the NCAA tournament is the same formula that the United States men's national team was so successful in getting to the World Cup in 2006, 2010, and 2014, and not so much in 2018. And then in 2022, it was different qualifying format. The hex was gone. You had the octagonal, which just it didn't roll off the tongue as nicely. And that route, that formula was get draws on the road, take care of business at home. Well, Coach Mulrooney and his squad had the taking care of draws on the road part down pat. You got to draw at Lipscomb, who beat you last year. You got to draw at Evansville, who beat you last year. And then there was another one. Like they had, they had it sort of halfway figured out, but they lost a home game to Belmont. They bounced back and beat Mercer. Then they lost a home game to Florida Gulf Coast. Okay, so that's your first 3 home games. You're 1-1-1. Probably you're 1-2-0. Excuse me. Home loss to Belmont. Home win against Mercer. Home loss to Florida Gulf Coast. Probably really needed to have the Belmont and the Florida Gulf Coast games. You got a road draw at Jacksonville. Okay. Back home, you lost to FIU at home, and that's especially damaging because it's in conference play. Then road loss at North Carolina. That's one you show up and just hope you don't show your ass, because North Carolina is a very, very, very high-level program. And when you played them in the NCAA tournament 2 years ago, you gave it all you had, and you just came up short. There's nothing wrong with that. And they lost this one 3-0. I don't think that's a result that anybody is going to lose any sleep over. It would have been great to have won. It would have been great to get a draw. It would have been better to lose by less than 3 goals. But, that's one when you play the schedule game before the season and you're looking at it, okay, this is a win, this is a loss, this is a win, this is a loss. That's one that you just kind of pencil in as a loss just because that's such a high-level program. So 3-0 on the road at North Carolina, I don't think anybody's going to be fired up about that. It then looked like after that game, they started to show a little bit of life. You go on the road to UAB and you beat them 3-2. And that was especially encouraging because the team has really struggled to score goals. I mean, the 3 games before that, shutout at North Carolina, shutout at home against FIU, shutout at Jacksonville. And going back to that Florida Gulf Coast game, they scored in the first half of that game and then gave up a goal right before halftime. The ghost of Tim Mulqueen's past had struck. And I think they went 7 straight scoreless halves, which in such a small season can't happen. But they go on the road in conference play to UAB. They get a 3-2 win, which was also nice because 901 FC, may they rest in peace, always struggled to go down to the Birmingham Legion and get results, except for last year. You can go back and watch the show from April of 2024 we did, where I detailed my disastrous experience in trying to cover 901 FC at the Birmingham Legion, the fantastic venue down there at Protective Stadium, but there wasn't a single person in there that knew their elbow from their asshole. That's obviously not where the Tigers played the Blazers, but it's on the road in Birmingham. They went down there and got a win. Rack these locks. Let's go. They come back home. They get a game against Tulsa. Very entertaining, wild 3-2 game. So you're thinking, all right, here we go. Took a little bit longer than last year, but 2 years ago they started conference playoff rough, found a way to score a big upset win over Missouri State, who was a top 10 team in the country at the time, and funnily enough, who is now in your conference and nowhere near what they were promised. And it's like a switch went off. And then last year, you started the non-conference off schedule absolutely terrible, got into conference play, flipped the switch, won the conference regular season title. So it took a little bit longer this year, and thinking, okay, all right. Problematic couple of home losses, right? Florida Gulf Coast, Belmont, FIU, okay, not great. Road win at UAB, home win against Tulsa, back-to-back 3-2. We scored 6 goals in 2 games. I think things are rocking and rolling. All right, and then you go on the road to Charlotte, and that's a tough one. I mean, that's probably the toughest game in conference, and that's one last year Charlotte came here, and they were a top 10 team, and Memphis knocked them off. And that's something else for all of their historical lack of success and all of their recent history of success. That's something that I feel like isn't talked about enough, myself included, is like 4 out of the last 5 years, not counting this year, but like, so 4 of the previous 5 seasons before this one, they've knocked off a top 10 team. It's 4 out of 5 or 3 out of 4, something like that. But that's so strange that there's always that one game where they just somehow they get up for it and blank the top 10 team. And last year that was Charlotte. But, you know, going on the road to Charlotte is a much different proposition, and they drop that game 3-1. And so you're like, well, maybe that 2-game win streak was not indicative of any kind of turnaround, and maybe it was just a 2-game win streak. And then most recently they go out, they go on the road to Florida Atlantic, they drop that one 2-0. So that's where they stand. Right now they are 3-6-3 on the year. They have 3 regular season games left. 2 of those games are at home. That's Temple at home on Saturday at 7 p.m., Saturday the 18th, and then Sunday, November 2nd at 7 p.m. against USF. In between those, they have a trip to Missouri State. But it looks like basically there's, from the FAU game through the end of the season, there's just 1 game per week. No 3 games in 7 days or anything like that. So rest shouldn't be a factor. But, you know, if I'm not mistaken, and I've looked this up, and the AAC website really doesn't paint a very clear picture of the conference tournament structure. Now, I know on the women's side, only the top 8 teams qualify. On the men's side, I think it's top 6. Because the top 2 seeds automatically get byes to the semifinals, the way Memphis did last year. And then the 2 remaining teams come from a first-round game on a campus site. So that would be 4, 5, 6. So that would be 6 teams. And right now, Memphis is in 5th, which means they're probably good. As it stands right now, I think that means they would have to go on the road to FIU in the first round of the conference tournament. So the full table, you got FAU in 1st, USF in 2nd, Charlotte in 3rd, FIU in 4th, Memphis in 5th, Tulsa in 6th, Missouri State in 7th, UAB in 8th, Temple, rock bottom, 0 points. They on the season are 1-9-2. They're not good. So if Memphis can't get a win against Temple on Saturday, there's some problems. Like Temple on paper is bad. So right now they're still alive for the conference tournament. And, you know, the conference tournament typically tends to be pretty chalky. At least it has been the last 2 years. Well, I should say that Memphis was the 1 seed last year and lost in the semifinal. But they're at a point where if you want to go to the NCAA tournament, you're going to have to win the conference tournament. And if you want to win the conference tournament, you got to make the conference tournament. And they're in right now, but they need to close the season out strong. And luckily, 2 of their 3 remaining games are against teams below them in the standings. Temple would need to have I guess mathematically Temple could still pass them even though they have 0 points. I'm sure they have a couple of games left, but you know, they hadn't won a game in conference play yet. I don't know why we should expect them to start. So if Memphis can get 6 points from their next 3 games, 6 out of a possible 9, I think they'll be sitting pretty good for the conference tournament. And then once you get the conference tournament, anything can happen. We see it all the time on the basketball side where somebody just hasn't been particularly good all year. They get the conference tournament, they catch fire, and they make a crazy run in the NCAA tournament. I don't know that would happen here, but I think that's what we have to hang our hat on, because I think Coach Mulrooney is out of buttons to push. I think he has pushed every single button that he knows to push, and that's after one of the games. I don't remember which one it was. In the post game, he's like, "Look, if we're winning, I keep the same lineup. We're winning, we're scoring goals, keeping clean sheets. If you guys are getting the job done, that's the way we keep it. Makes sense to me. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right?" And he said, if we're not winning, if we're just drawing, if we're losing, if we're not scoring goals, we got to figure out a way to change it up. We got to figure out a way to start making things work. And they've won 2 games since then, but they've lost just as many. And in fact, I think probably more. I think that was the FIU game. That was either FIU or Florida Gulf Coast. I don't remember which one. So goal scoring outside of the UAB and the Tulsa game has been a struggle. And luckily, your next 2 games are against teams that are below you in the standings. So you really need to get that Temple win on Saturday. Really need to. That's one. I don't like saying must win in games where elimination is not a factor, but Saturday against Temple feels like a must win, because if you can't beat Temple, you're not winning the next 2. So you need all 3 points against Temple on Saturday, and then probably going to need to beat Missouri State. They are below you, and they were supposed to be better than they are. That was one of the big gets on the men's soccer side for the AAC, was adding Missouri State because they'd been so good the last couple of years, especially when Memphis went up there and knocked them off as a top 10 team. But right now they've got 3 points from 4 games. That's not good. Right now they're on the outside looking in. So if you can beat Temple and beat Missouri State, that'll get you to 12 points. And then I think whatever happens against USF happens. They're second in the table, so they're probably going to be a pretty tough out. So I think you're going to need to get your 6 points in the next 2 games. Now, if you get a win and 2 draws, it gets interesting. If you get a win, a draw, and a loss, then you might start sweating, and anything else is not happening. So, and that's a shame, because I know Coach Mulrooney had high hopes for this team this year. I know I had high hopes for this team this year, and as of the moment of this recording, they haven't really been met. And that's a bummer, because I think maybe we got just a little bit spoiled over the last couple of years with the success that the team has had. And, that's something I've yelled about the men's basketball program for years. It's like Tiger basketball fans tend to think that the 4-year run under Cal, where they went to the second weekend every year, was just automatically normal, and what that program is, when the decade plus prior and the 17 years since kind of suggested that was an outlier and not the norm. I do wonder if maybe that's where we ended up with the men's team here, the men's soccer team, where we got spoiled with 3 straight years of success and kind of expected it to be the new norm, where perhaps it's really an outlier. Too early to tell. There's still 3 games left in the season where you can get 6 points and make the conference tournament and see what happens. And then you've got the next couple of years to see if what the new normal is. But I hope they get these I hope they get these wins. I hope they get into the conference tournament and show out well there. Now, the women's team is rocking and rolling. They are having a very, very, very good season. I mean, there's only maybe 1 or 2 ways that it can be better. The game against Iowa State that got canceled because of bad weather trying to get to Ames, Iowa, that could have been a power conference win. Another win against the Big 12, and another kind of middle finger to the Big 12. Be like, you passed on us again, and we keep beating you. Maybe that's why they passed on them. Then the UT Martin home game finished 1-0. They scored 12 seconds into the game. and then like nothing else happened for the remaining 89 and a half minutes. That's one that you probably would have liked to see 4, 5, maybe 6 goals. That sounds disrespectful to UT Martin, but Memphis has historically dominated them. Last time they played, it was 4-0, and I think they took their foot off the gas in that game. So would have liked to have seen a little bit more there. Had a home draw in conference play, which was kind of their undoing last year. You had the home draw against UAB. Unfortunately, that's the one game that I didn't make it to so far this year. Speaking of which, unfortunately, I will not be at the men's game against Temple on Saturday. I have to be out of town for a wedding. Remember, say no to fall weddings. And so the one women's game that I missed is many, many, many months ago. My wife and I had bought tickets to see Three Dog Night and the Little River Band at Snowden Grove, and it just happened to fall on that Thursday. And I'm very fortunate that my wife is supportive, appreciative, and understanding of all of my soccer extracurricular activities. And so she said, "Babe, we're going to the concert." I said, "Okay, we're going to the concert." And that's what we did. So that's the one women's game at home that I have missed this year. But other than that, there hadn't been any disappointing results outside of that UAB draw. Now they've gotten into conference play, and they have had to learn to kind of shift from mode of the hunter, as they were in their non-conference games when they're getting wins against Ole Miss and against a ranked Vanderbilt and against Missouri and against a number 2 Tennessee. They had to switch from the hunter into the hunted, because they are the premier program in this conference in women's soccer. And go think back to last year when I think East Carolina and Tulsa got draws here. You would have thought they won the national championship with the way they were celebrating. Coming and getting a result in Memphis against Memphis in women's soccer was one of the toughest things to do. And so for them to be on this incredible unbeaten streak at home is very, very impressive. For them to continue to get up and to continue to achieve and continue to get results is very impressive. And let's not forget, like, it was the mantra through the first half of the season. And I think because as the season has gone on, we've gotten used to it and kind of forgotten it. This is still the youngest team Brooks Monaghan's ever coached. And this is year 26. That's a quarter century plus for Brooks Monaghan at the University of Memphis. They just keep winning. They hadn't lost this year. They're 12-0-2. Right now in the polls, they are the number 6 team in the country. That's like, when was the last time the men's basketball team was the number 6 team in the country? Has the football team ever been ranked that high? So like, this is like high heights for the women's soccer team. Now, with every plus comes a frustrating minus. You can go back to the show I did 2 years ago, where probably the best team that I've ever seen the women's program at the University of Memphis have, with Maya Jones, Izzy Monk, Katie Bierman, Ashley Henderson was a freshman on that team, Momo Nakau was on that team, and Valerie Cito, Anna Hauer was on that team. They went through the regular season, the conference tournament, lost once the entire season. I think they were 18-1-0. 18 wins in 19 games. The only loss was on the road at a ranked Alabama team who'd gone to the Final Four the year before, and Memphis was a 6th seed. What? So last year, they are a top 25 team the entire season. They got up to number 5, if I'm not mistaken. They got up to as high as number 5. They lost one regular season game. They lost the conference tournament final. They're 13-2-4, and you're thinking, okay, We know how this goes. They're not going to get a home NCAA tournament game, and they're probably going to get a tough draw, but there's no reason they can't win at least a game. Wrong. They're not going to the NCAA tournament. What? Their only loss was to Tennessee. Tennessee was 9-8, and they went to the NCAA tournament. What? So you get to this year, and you have all these wins over power conference opponents. You haven't lost yet. You had a couple of your non-conference games where you scored a touchdown, and you're a top 6 team in the country, and the wins are aging well. The non-conference wins are aging well, and as Coach Monaghan has kind of been on this mantra, the AAC is much better this year than it was last year. I would agree with that. And the NCAA, the selection committee, the tournament committee, whoever, whatever you want to call them, puts out their top 16. Memphis is on there. They're the only non-power conference team on there. Awesome. Cool. Number 14. So on the surface, you're like, okay, let's do the math. So 4 number 1 seeds, 4 number 2 seeds. So that puts Memphis on track to be a 4 seed, which would mean they get to host a home NCAA tournament game in the first round and would probably be the highest NCAA tournament seed they've ever had. But everybody else thinks they're a top 6 team in the country, and you guys are telling us they're not even a top 12 or 13 team in the country? Where there's something that's not adding up here. The scales are out of whack. There's just something that's not right. Now, Coach Monaghan said it after the last-minute win against FAU, which was one that you're sitting there in the back of your mind going, man, this game is 1-1. Well, let's back it up. Thursday night, they played North Texas, and Memphis comes out. North Texas looks like they do not want to be there. Like, you get done with the anthems, you do the handshakes, and the Memphis players always, and the song Black Betty is blaring over the loudspeaker, and the Memphis players are jumping up and down and hyping up and screaming and hooting and hollering, getting fired up to play the game. And the North Texas players are like, yeah, whatever. I'm like, okay, they don't want to be here. This is going to be a cakewalk. And Memphis has all the chances, and then North Texas takes the lead. And you're like, uh-oh, maybe they do want to be here. Maybe they were playing possum. I don't know. Memphis responds with 4 unanswered goals. 2 in the first half, 2 in the second half. They win 4-1. Okay, no sweat. You get the FAU game, and first half, most of the whole first half is each team trying to figure out what the other team's doing. Wasn't a whole lot going on. Second half, Ike Kitagawa says, like, we're tired of this. Goal. Let's go. Let's get in. Let's get out. Let's get out of here. Go. 1-0. Rock and roll. Rack these locks. And okay, so we're up 1-0. The one real disadvantage that I've noticed that Memphis has this year is if they go up against a team with size, specifically height, that can be a problem. It was a problem in the Missouri game, and it almost became a problem in the Tennessee game. And it was a problem on this FAU corner kick. And that's what Coach Monaghan said after the game. All FAU was looking to do was either hit them on the counter with a long ball or score one off a set piece. Well, they got their goal off a corner, and the height mismatch in the penalty area was almost cartoonish. And I don't care how well you're marking or what, but if somebody's got a foot on you, they're going to get that header 10 times out of 10. That's what happened. FAU ties it up. So he's thinking, oh, no, not another home draw. And it's getting late. And FAU was battling their asses off defensively, like laying out. Again, coming to Memphis and getting a result in Memphis, if you're another team in the AAC, is the biggest accomplishment you're probably going to have that year. And so they were all out to get that draw. Memphis got a couple of chances late. I think Flavie Dubé hit the crossbar. I know Ashley Henderson had a couple of shots that went just wide. Speaking of Ashley Henderson, going back to the North Texas game, I'm sorry. She, on Ike Kitagawa's goal against North Texas, Ashley Henderson is probably the best you're going to see all year. Cut back, laser beam, perfect, inch perfect. I didn't have to duck. She didn't have to break stride. She just kept right on running off her dome into the goal. How that wasn't on a Sports Center top 10, I don't know. I mean that should have been on Sports Center. That should have been on Football Americas. That should have been on ESPNW. It should have been everywhere. And I don't think you're going to see a better assist all year. Also from the North Texas game, Ashley Henderson scores a penalty. Much better penalty than the one she took against Tennessee. And Brooks said, he's like, look, we don't question Ashley. If she's out there, she's taking it. And they went on the road and got a ranked road win in conference. And I think this ties into what Coach Monaghan has been saying about the conference is a lot better this year. How often do you get a chance to get a ranked win in conference? They went on the road to Rice. Rice is the number 25 team in the country, and they beat them 2-0. And Findlay took a penalty in that game, or maybe it was the Tulsa game. And it was a road game. And the only reason that Findlay Lavin took the penalty is because Ashley Henderson was not on the field. And Brooks said, if Ashley's on the field, she's taking that penalty. So she got one against North Texas, buried it. No sweat, no fuss, no muss. I think she just psyched herself out in that Tennessee game. Took way too long to take it. And it does appear that she has learned her lesson from that. Because that penalty against North Texas was a very, very good penalty. Back to the Florida Atlantic game. You're sitting here thinking, man, we cannot have another home conference draw. I mean, because even though that would still mean we're still unbeaten, the burden of proof for Memphis in any sport is always going to be so much higher than it is for everybody else. And that's not really the most fair, and it sucks, and I get that, but that's how it is. You cannot give them the slightest little opportunity to dock you. You essentially, as we found out in 2023, with an 18-1 record, you have to be perfect. So you couldn't afford to drop this, and thank heavens for Ai Kitagawa, because she had a shot cleared off the line and had the rebound cleared off the line and said, I'm tired of this. Go. 2-1 with a minute left in the game. And Coach Monaghan had the quote of the year. I said, Coach, what's going through your mind when that ball finally hits the back of the net? He says, thank God now I can go to Taco Bell. That's one of the best quotes I've heard in a post-game press conference maybe ever. Thank God I can go to Taco Bell. I enjoyed that. That was good. So with that win, they are 12-0-2 on the season. But talking about where they are with the number 14 in the NCAA's top 16, is it good that they're that high? Yes. Is it good that they know where they stand with the NCAA? Yes. But Coach Monaghan's not really going to pay all attention to it. He said it to us in the post game, and he said it this morning, if I'm not mistaken, with Greg and Eli on Sports 56. He said, look, that's great, but we're not going to pay attention to it because they can take it away from you like that. I said, that makes sense. And he said, imagine if that goal hadn't gone in. Do you think we'd still be number 14? No, he's probably right. So we, and when I say we, I mean me, we as media and you as fans can be like, hell yeah, number 14, but also screw you. We should be higher than number 14. That's for us. And for Coach Monaghan to not worry about it or pay attention to it, that's probably best for his team. And as the coach of his team, that's his job and his responsibility is to do what's best for his team. And I think probably not paying attention to the outside noise is probably what's best for his team. So they have 3 games left in the regular season before the conference tournament. Not that it was ever in doubt, but with the win the other night, they did officially lock up a spot in the conference tournament. They are top of the table, but UTSA is right behind them, and they do go to UTSA. They've got at East Carolina on Sunday, at UTSA next Thursday, and then on Sunday the 26th, they are at home against Temple. That's a noon kickoff. So I figure if they get 6 points in the next 2 games, they lock up the top spot again, win another AAC regular season title, number 1 seed in the conference tournament again, and hopefully they just, for lack of a better term, you hope they just buzz through it. They're going to have to work. They're going to have to fight. But one thing that Coach Monaghan said is this team has some special. He said it's too early to call them a special team, but they've got special. And he said one of the things that has most impressed him about this team is they don't just like soccer, they love soccer. And he said, when they have training, when they have practice at 6:30 in the morning every day, half the team's out there before he is. Half the team is out there before 6:30. And then he said the other half stays late. So they're putting in the work and they're getting the results. And let's just hope that they continue to get those results, because you have to figure if they keep getting the results and keep doing what they're supposed to do, that they're probably going to get a home NCAA tournament game again, which would be the third time in the last 5 years. Just please, if that happens, somebody other than LSU. Just because you had LSU in 21 and you had LSU in 23. Just for variety's sake, let's get somebody else. So, that being said, that is probably going to wrap it. Oh, I know what I was going to say. We were trying to figure out the format for the NCAA women's soccer tournament is very strange. So the first round is entirely campus sites, right? Higher seeded team plays lower seeded team. That's that. Now, the second round and Sweet 16 are then, for most teams, neutral site, but they are at the second highest remaining seed in your side of the bracket, right? So that would be the number 1 seed and the number 2 seed are hosting second round and Sweet 16 games. And then the Elite 8, the highest remaining seed, goes. So it's like, so if you are seeded 3 through 8, you're guaranteed 1, assuming you keep winning, you get 1 home NCAA tournament game. If you are the 2 seed, you get to host through the Sweet 16. If you are the 1 seed, you host through the Elite 8, and the Final Four National Championship are at a neutral site, which this year is at the new NWSL Stadium in Kansas City. And I say new, I think it opened up last year. Traditionally, it's in Cary, North Carolina, but I think there's probably some symbolism involved with having the Women's National Championship and I think, sole women's soccer stadium that is a stadium owned solely by a women's soccer team in this country. So let's hope that the Brooks Monaghan crew, well, that's a month and a half off, but let's hope that they get to the point to partake in that little bit of historic symbolism. That is going to do it for us here tonight. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Again, I'm your host, Lawrence Dockery. You can find me on Twitter at LDoc93. Find the 901 Soccer Podcast on Twitter at 901 Soccer Pod. Find Bluff City Media on Twitter at BluffCity_media. 901 Soccer on Facebook, Bluff City Media on Facebook, and of course, right here on YouTube. Please like this video, please comment on this video, and make sure that you are subscribed to the Bluff City Media YouTube channel. We will talk to you next time.